Greetings to the participants of the Ending Age-Related Diseases 2021. This conference brings together thought leaders and researchers working on rejuvenation biotechnology with the goal of extending healthy human life. Before we can see large-scale implementation of rejuvenation biotechnology, we will have to convince people that greatly extended lifespans can be a good thing. It's rather hard to do because the very idea of breaking what we know about the ordinary cycle of human life, decades of presenting compelling knowledge didn't actually lead to a change of perception just yet. But maybe it only proves that humans are emotional rather than rational beings, and our approach should rely on visceral feeling rather than data. And today I'm speaking about it with Tim Maupin, a New York City-based film director, visual effects artist, and Emmy award-winning cinematographer. So Tim has directed multiple short films that have played in a variety of festivals, including San Diego Film Festival, Indie Memphis, Atlanta Short Fest, the 3D Film Festival in Sundance, and he has won multiple awards for Best Dramatic Short Film, Cinematography, and Visual Effects. Tim is currently working on a movie, The Last Generation to Die, as part of his effort to achieve public acceptance of the idea of healthy life extension. So, hi, Tim. Happy to have you with us.
Hello. Yeah, happy to be here.
I was reading many definitions of art when I was preparing to this interview, and all of them are very different. So let me begin with a very general question. What is art, in your opinion, and why did it come into existence as part of the human culture?
Well, I mean, that's a sort of a classic, I don't know if there's a perfect answer or perfect definition for art. I think people probably have different ideas about what it is. But I think, overall to me, I mean, there was actually a point where I sort of tried to assess that personally, like what art is, because again, it's sort of like, what is beauty, that sort of question. I think on a simple level, probably the most simple level is it's just human expression, human expression of creativity, and I think for whatever reason, some of us, or maybe all of us at different levels, have this need, and it's certainly apparent across history. I mean, it's been with us for as long as we can tell. So there's some sort of, just something that needs to get out, and so it's an output, but then it's also an input. So it's a way of communication, I think, at a kind of a pretty like nuanced and advanced level, I would say. And so I think that's like kind of core level, and then for me also, I think, the things I look for when I look at art, or what might be art, is just, does it have a historical or cultural aspect to it? Is somebody sort of talking about their experience in their time, like where they're at and what they're, how they feel about their culture, what's happening, is it good or bad? And that could be an open-ended question. I think looking for multiple meanings, like something that can be interpreted by different people in different ways, usually represents something that's pretty complex and sophisticated in that regard. And then I think maybe one way to look at it, from our current standpoint, or where we sit in human history and wherever we go, is does it stand the test of time? There are certain pieces of art that people seem to keep coming back to, and why do they work? But I think that's one aspect I look for. And then I think on just a really simple level, you can look at the more formative qualities of it. You can judge it from a sense of craft, like if it's a visual art or painting or something, you can take a look at the different techniques that were used, things like that. And then I think finally, how does it make you feel? Like to me, if it's a combination of all of those things, but it can also make you feel something viscerally. And maybe that can even be mixed feelings. You might not even be sure why you're feeling a certain way. So it's a lot of things, I think. And oftentimes people say you don't know it until you see it, or, that sort of thing. But if I had to make a checklist, those are sort of what I would say. But at the same time, I think there is something sort of intangible about it as well, something you just sort of feel and know.
I see. Very interesting. And funny fact, in a report published by the World Health Organization a couple of years ago, and by the way, it aggregates around 3,000 studies, it was said that arts contribute to extending healthy lifespans and prevent diseases. One possible explanation is that arts are by nature very close to something like a multimodal therapy that has major anti-stress effects. I wonder if making movies feels the same way.
Well, I can certainly see why some art might have that feeling or might have that reason behind it. It's it's sort of funny in the sense that I think most people who make movies think it's very stressful and it's a great challenge. And it's some people we think we're crazy trying to make a movie because it's a nearly impossible task. There's so many different layers. You're finding the funding, you're putting together this enormous, difficult project with tons of people involved. So in a weird way, like I think some of the things surrounding filmmaking can have that effect, where it might release stress, but the actual process itself, I feel like the stress release is probably more at the end, after you've made it and you can see it and you feel it, you're watching it with people. Yeah, so that'd be my answer there.
Mhm. Yeah, I can get that. The craft part of the process is absolutely something that requires a lot of effort. It can be stressful, especially since it involves, a lot of brainstorming and trying to understand how exactly to put those pieces of the puzzle together. But I personally think that art has such a strong aspect of communication in it because, whenever we put something outside, we present ourselves to someone, and that someone is looks at the products of our activities, and it's different. It's something different. It's a new information that they get out of the pieces of our art, will it be music or paintings or any other, or even text. They perceive the reality with the eyes of someone else. And in this regard, I think it will be accurate to assume that art has this very strong aspect of breaking stereotypes and introducing something new. In fact, it's even acknowledged as one of the functions of the art. And probably it makes sense to see art as a way to get rid of the rigidity of thinking that may actually be contradicting the very idea that society must progress and that society must change, or even one particular human must progress and change. When you have something that makes you change your mind or see things differently or take another angle or take another side, definitely it improves your own flexibility. It allows you to evolve and develop some new vision, new opinions, new knowledge. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you can look at sort of, there is a structure to society and, that's changed over time or whatever, but there does seem to be a certain rigidity, as you said, to the daily grind that we go through and the daily, like the sort of building up and the progression of society. And I do think art is kind of sort of a separate part to that, not really opposing it, but it can make you break away from that sort of thinking for a bit. And actually, I would argue, can help you come back to that sort of structure with, like you said, new ideas, new thoughts. It can break the status quo. So I think it's a very powerful form of communication, as you said, that probably has actually shaped society in ways that would be hard to trace. Some, maybe not, maybe not always. I think sometimes you could trace certain art to different movements and things like that. But like for example, when I go to an art museum, I sometimes I'll come back, after the day of walking through an art museum, looking at paintings or photographs or whatever it is. I get a little upset that I'm like, why don't I do this more often? And I try to go to museums fairly frequently, but every time I'm like, I should be doing this at least once a month or whatever, because even myself as a creative, I come away with new ideas and thoughts that you literally begin the day and you had no idea that you're going to wind up with this kind of interesting thought that you didn't have before. So I think it does really open up your brain, and I think you have to be a little more open to it at different times. But this is maybe going back to the definition. I think great art can sort of arrest you without you even fully being ready for it. Like if you feel something and just from a work that you see and you weren't expecting it, that can be a very powerful response that can literally be life-changing, I would argue. So
yes, I agree with you. And it seems to me that even looking at other pieces of art, I mean, created by other people, you are taking a lesson in creativity in a way. And you know what, for instance, there are studies that indicate that human creativity has several stages while it's developing over the course of human life. And the very first stage of it is like observing the examples and incorporating the examples first, then playing with some aspects of those examples before it comes to creation of something purely original. So I think, it's just an organic part of us trying to learn more about the world and then trying to do something ourselves.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I think it is sort of inbuilt in our human nature, and and I think we build upon it as we go on in life. So
yeah, as it was said in the Dune, without change, something sleeps inside, right? And so the sleeper must awaken.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. So let us go to my next question. So cinematography grew into such a huge industry, and it's now extremely competitive. Now, if the movie doesn't make money in the very first days after release, it can be called a failure, regardless of its educational or artistic potential. The goal is to tease our senses, and no surprise that 9 out of 10 movies picturing life extension represented in a negative way and show some form of catastrophe, or they show that there is a turning back on status quo at the end. Anyways, there is some drama. Is there still any good cinema out there, movies for people who like to think and not feel? And if yes, where to find them?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, I think, this gets into a discussion of like what movies might be art, what movies might be more entertainment. I think they, fit on some sliding scale, regardless of what movie. But yeah, I think, movies that would, there is the term art house movies, in cinema, where, these types of films are probably closer to the, art side of things, where I would argue they do make you think more. They're a bit more, they're not as easy to parse or understand. You have to kind of, it's sort of something that might wash over you, and you might watch 2 or 3 times before you really get a sense. But yeah, I think the Criterion Collection is a pretty great starting point for any that it's, a mix of classic cinema, art house cinema, I think. But I would argue most of the films in that canon definitely are more of the thinking type film. But yeah, I think there's also a really healthy, sort of indie film world that's going on. And yeah, I mean, even a movie that I saw recently that I would say made me think quite a bit, and even I would say parlays into the life extension realm, is a movie called The Father with Anthony Hopkins. And I mean, the film, this is where I think the film works on multiple levels, because it certainly makes you think. It's about a man who has dementia, and it kind of operates as like a low-key horror film in a way where it's, you see the horrors of this sort of play out, because it's pretty hard to objectively, this is a horrible condition, once you see it. And so in the film I don't want to give anything too much away, but it's like the film is done in such a way that, the structure of the film itself makes you think about how it might actually feel to have this disease, or how that might be to be a caretaker of someone with that disease. And of course, it's a film where the performances are really great and everything does build up to, an excellent structure. But yeah, I would argue, maybe most recently for me, that was a thinking film, I would say, but also a feeling film. I was definitely moved during the film as well, but also does relate to, some of the ideas of longevity and potentially what we're setting out to do in terms of slowing aging and slowing those age-related diseases.
Well, good to know. Thanks for the recommendation. I will put it on my watch list. And the movie that I liked recently is the movie Old by M. Night Shyamalan. It has the same flavor. It makes you think a lot. And also what I like about it, without giving out some spoilers, what I like about it is that the producer makes you follow his thought process, and he makes a lot of metaphors about everything, but mostly about how people perceive the importance of certain things in their lives, and how this feeling of importance changes depending on the circumstances, and how basically you move back to the most important things, the ones that only matter, if you are put in a scenario where you have a very, 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 very limited time. That's a very interesting movie. Once again, it's definitely recommended, especially for the life extension community, because the movie speaks about a form of scarily accelerated aging. Anyways, so Tim, let's talk about your movie now. So tell me more about it. The name is pretty intriguing, The Last Generation to Die. So what this is about?
Yeah, so this is a film I've been working on for a few years. I made a short film a while back. We had a successful Kickstarter. Some of the community might remember it, but it started with, the film is called The Last Generation to Die. It's a quote from Gerald Sussman from MIT, who said something to the effect, paraphrasing, but I'm afraid I might be in the last generation to die. Which, when I first read it, I wasn't really involved in the longevity community at that time. It was just a very interesting, intriguing thought. Like, if these, if anti-aging technologies are going to come about, there will be sort of a quote unquote last generation of people who die in a natural sense, who don't have the choice to do so. So that was just an intriguing idea for me to set a short film in. So we have a 15-minute short film that exists online that you can watch right now, and that sort of serves as a proof of concept for the full-length feature film that we're working on. But the general story is it's about a scientist, Lily, who she's basically responsible for like a new anti-aging technology that's supposed to be one of the strongest, sort of actually, in terms of de-aging you. And so at the same time, her aging father, who's in his late 70s, has a major heart issue. And so she's forced to choose to put him on the trial. And there's a bit of an ethical question mark of whether she should do that or not, given it's her own trial, that sort of thing, or her own company. So there's a bit of a philosophical back and forth between them. He sort of believes in the natural progression of life, so to speak. So there's that. But then that kind of encompasses the short film. And then so in the feature film, we've taken that further, and Lily's mother, Julia, is also part of the picture now. And so I'm giving a little bit away, but about halfway through the film, as Oliver, the father, is actually getting better from the aging therapies. We're actually seeing a true sort of reversal of aging. He's feeling better. His heart is working better. The mother actually has a stroke. And so at that point, you begin to see this interesting dynamic shift where she's getting worse and he's getting better. He's feeling guilty about being on the trial. So really, like, side by side, we're literally witnessing, here's the effects of aging happening on her. Here's the effects of aging happening, reversing on him. And the whole time, Lily is met with, there's some socio-political issues going on about, is aging a disease? Her company's trying to push that forward. So she's met with a lot of, challenges in that regard. And I won't get into the ending, I'll leave that as a bit of a surprise. But yeah, I think with this storyline, we've really fleshed out a lot of the narratives in longevity, and it sort of looks at some of the arguments for and against that people have, and really, I would say, just is a strong conversation for it. And also, I would argue is it's not there's many movies in the sort of future realm or anything anywhere near longevity that are dystopian, and I think this film does not take that angle. I would say it's a very realistic film that just is kind of about the conversation. We're not making the company inherently bad, which a lot of times you see in movies like that. The corporation is the evil thing or whatever. So, it just takes a much more realistic look at how the future might actually play out. And really, in the film, reversing aging is a positive notion. It's shown to, be a positive effect on society. And so really the drama comes into play with the family, the characters.
That's actually fascinating. I really like the plot that you have in mind. And I also find it quite interesting that you would like to expose things that normally stay hidden. We don't really speak much about the sufferings of the old people. We don't speak much about the struggles of the families that have people with age-related diseases, especially if those people, are bedridden or, have severe limitations concerning their daily activities. All of this stays behind the scenes, and not just in the cinema, but also in our real lives. I mean, the fact that old people rarely go for a walk just because feeling frail and, having problems with their balance or something. we don't see them much. We see younger people, we see adults, we see children who play around, but not so many old people. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to discuss the problems of rejuvenation research, because the problem itself seems hidden from your eyes all the time. And it's interesting that you decided to bring this up, because it's indeed much more realistic this way. And maybe this way people will really feel connected with the older generation, and will see that, it makes sense to help them and to reduce human suffering.
Yeah, I think a quick, sort of addition is the idea of putting the drama at the, this sort of gulf that will occur between two generations, because, once these technologies do come into play, there will naturally be sort of a divide between people who just missed the cutoff, so to speak, and then people who are able to, take part of the technologies. So to me, that's a perfect spot for interesting drama.
Where can people find more information about your project? Do you have a website?
Yeah, the film's website is just lastgenmovie.com. So just lastgenmovie.com. And then you can reach out to me via email, just timmaupin@gmail.com. But the film is, we're kind of getting the ball rolling. We're in the funding phase right now. We do have a commitment so far. We're about a third of the way funded from our budget. And so we're just at the very beginning processes of, starting to look into casting and that sort of thing. So if anybody out there wants to help fund a longevity movie, reach out.
Wonderful. That sounds amazing. What do you think will be the public perception of this movie when it comes out? Say, we already know what happens when similar movies comes out that speak about the problems, like that movie Father that you just mentioned. So what do you think? How do you plan to change public perception with this movie?
Well, I think at large, it will get the conversation started in a bigger way. I think, once again, as far as I'm aware of, there aren't that many longevity movies out there, in general, and then specifically talking about these things in a very realistic light. Again, most of the time, the movies you see, it's sort of heightened. It's very, very sci-fi. It doesn't feel that realistic. It doesn't feel like it feels like it's 100 years away, which maybe it will be, but I think, the film I'm trying to set is within the next 20 to 30 years. So it has a more realistic, more palpable, like something that we can all kind of foresee. So my take is that I think it'll start a conversation, and I think there's enough sort of psychological, aspects to the film that I think people will not inherently think that, if we can slow aging or reverse aging, that's a bad thing. I think, they'll actually begin to look at it as a positive thing as a result.
Yeah, I definitely believe that the idea of presenting it in a realistic way is a good one, primarily because normally when we deal with newcomers to our community, when we speak to new people who know nothing about rejuvenation research, typically what we hear are the examples that they take from some sci-fi movie. I mean, people learn this way. This is where they grab those examples and, those stereotypes about life extension. A lot of public concern come directly from those movies, because in most of the movies, somehow touching upon the topic of life extension, it's represented in a negative way. And there are specifics. There are, some crazy people who are immortal, some dictators or some criminals. There is an extreme vanity. There are some other problems related to it. There is inequality. There is only for the rich. So anyways, it's great that one can take it in another route and basically present with something that people can use as a reliable example, because it's very close to the reality.
Yeah, I would just say that to add to that, I can see why filmmakers do that. It's easier to draw from that sort of bigger stakes conflict, and I would argue that it's a little harder to make something that's more realistic and more nuanced, like I'm doing with this film. But I think the payoff in terms of the realistic impact of how people are going to view life extension is better. It's literally treated more real. So you walk out thinking, oh, if this were possible, that would actually be really interesting. I could do this or that. It would make, I think it's going to make people consider things in a way that's far more realistic. I mean, not to say that grand sci-fi doesn't have it. It definitely has a good place in making us consider potential bad outcomes or scenarios. I think that's important too, but I think in this case, it's kind of a slightly refreshing take. And I also just, it's not to say that it's like, there will be some things that I think are kind of fun sci-fi. We have pieces of future technology like augmented reality taking part of it. There's ecological stuff like solar and things like that. All this stuff will kind of be a part of the future world that we're building. So
we'll have to begin with convincing people that this is a good thing. And when we will be doing so, it will be really important to find a way to communicate the new values connected to the possibilities of life extension. So for instance, whenever I'm thinking about my life, there are those, normal stages of human life, like childhood, education, career, family, kids, retirement, travel, hospital, funeral, right? We're all familiar with it. And I felt that something was wrong with the cycle when I started the studies for my third degree. And, I think that I have already had at least 3 different careers. So it made me realize that what I truly want from life extension is the possibility to keep learning, because to me, it seems like learning, generally knowing new things about the world, is something that is important. I get carried away with my curiosity and I want to follow my curiosity, but sometimes I have to put some limitations on myself because I just don't have time. And I realized that to get another education and another one, and then, to go in this direction and that direction, all of this requires time. And sometimes I have to take very painful decisions and abandon one activity just to be able to master something else. So to me personally, the possibility of living longer is strongly connected with the possibility of intellectual growth. Even if you think about it in some, concrete numbers, say there were studies about how many books a person can read during their lifetime. It turns out that it's only around from 5 to 8,000 books. Well, I really want to read over 20,000 at the very least. I'm very curious about, what other people think about life, about, the scientific research. Even if, the last ones are going to be recorded into my brain via Neuralink directly, I'm fine with it. I just want this information and want those experiences. So I wanted to ask you, or maybe it can also be the question about the movie. What kind of added value of life extension are you trying to communicate? And at the same time, what's your reason for life extension?
Some of my own sort of objective views that I've formed, one of them, to be honest, is I think there's something kind of a touch tragic about, life expectancy over 100 years ago or so was around 40 or 50 for developed nations. And now we've extended that to, about another 30 years, roughly speaking. And, I kind of feel like we're in a sort of a weird middle ground in healthcare for that regard. It's like evolution is, more or less, I'd say probably done with you by the time you're 40 or 50 from a reproductive standpoint. I mean, that is kind of how it plays out. But, we've now extended that further. And so, however, those years aren't exactly, in many cases, aren't exactly healthy years. By the time you get into 60s and 70s, your health is failing, and not always, there's exceptions and things like that, but sort of, I'd say statistically at large, that seems to be the case. And so, I kind of feel like it's like we've kind of gone halfway. We've sort of moved life forward, or life expectancy forward, and but we haven't really made those years that much better. So it feels like we either need to just forget about the whole thing and go back to what evolution thinks, or we should just keep going and extend that to much further healthier life. And so to me, that's just kind of like a logical viewpoint of where we are, it seems, in medical history. So I think that's kind of an observation. And then as part of that, I think this is kind of where I'm approaching or just entering middle age, and it's like you accumulate all this wisdom, and you start to understand yourself on a really deep level that would have helped you out a lot, say 10 or 20 years ago. And then that's about the time that again, as they say, you're over the hill, and so you start moving down. So that also seems a bit tragic. I think that there's something kind of profound about the idea of retaining the wisdom that you have and being able to put that into a much more practical use, I think people would have much more refined lives, living on and carrying that wisdom with them and being healthy at the same time. So I think those are pretty strong, like sort of personal reasons. And similar to you, I mean, I don't get bored too easily. I don't see myself getting bored. I think, sure, you can get occasionally bored, but it's very temporary. It's like, oh, for a night, I'm like, I don't know, what do I want to do? But that lasts for about one evening. And then the next day, it's like, okay, I'm back working on this project or that project. And, I also started out in computer programming, moved to filmmaking. I could see myself, I'm really interested in science. So I don't know, the sort of notion of like getting bored, I don't know, maybe after like 500 years, I don't know, even then, but I don't see it happening anytime soon for me. And also just kind of an excitement of what technologies will come to the future. But again, not to not acknowledge some of the challenges that we do face as a civilization, climate change, inequality. And I think there's just so much to do there, so it's like the more people we have that are, intellectually engaged in trying to work through those problems, the better, so yeah, I'd say there are more reasons, but I think those are kind of the key ones I think about a lot. So
yeah, thank you for sharing. To me personally, I think longer lives can also contribute to solving global problems in another way, because if you are supposed to live very long and stick there together with other people for much longer than now, you're supposed to think about the future. You're supposed to think and care about those global risks, because you are the one that is going to be affected by them if something goes wrong, right? So it's not that you can just put it aside and say, oh, that's not my problem. That's someone else's problem. Maybe my children's problem, maybe my grandchildren's problem, and then just do nothing about the problem that society or the planet is facing. So I think it's a really a catalyst of many positive changes if we will be able to achieve longer lifespans. Well, so far, it still remains rather a dream. We're optimistic, but we must let science take its course. We must wait for having those clinical trials and the results from them, confirmation that those therapies work and they are safe. And then we must work on distributing them equally, I hope. And only then we can actually enjoy this kind of scenario. So really looking forward to working on it. So, Tim, do you have a take-home message for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just sort of almost, reiterate what you just said. I think if we do want to live longer, it should be a grand holistic mission where also anybody, in my opinion, who, is interested in longevity should also be interested in the health of the planet, the health of societies, trying to get along better with each other. I think, and that might sound utopian and grand, but I think the more we can try to project towards that direction, the better. I think so. That would just be my, and I believe in longevity, but I also believe in working on those problems. I think we have to. I don't think we have a choice. I think that's just part of it as we go forward. So that'd be kind of my final thought.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining me today, Tim, and good luck with your movie. I'm looking forward to watching it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great.